Hello everyone. Welcome to our program on Social Security policy. My name is Patrick Ramos, and I am a library assistant at the Loudoun County Law Library. I'm very happy to be here to participate in this program, and I'm really looking forward to our time together this evening. And finally, it is my pleasure to now introduce the manager of the Law Library, Alice Zent, who will talk a little bit more about the specifics of this program and introduce our presenter.
Thank you, Patrick. Hello and welcome to the Loudoun County Law Library's program on Social Security policy. I am delighted that you are able to attend tonight's program. The Loudoun County Law Library is part of the Loudoun County Public Library System, but we are a special library. Our mission is to provide access to justice through providing legal resources to attorneys and pro se litigants. In service of that mission, we are committed to bringing programming that focuses on social and economic justice issues. Therefore, in consideration of our mission to provide access to justice, we are pleased to host this program on Social Security policy with our very distinguished teacher, Sita Slavov, who is a professor at the Schar School of Policy and Government, where she specializes in public finance and the economics of aging, including older people's work and retirement decisions, Social Security, and tax reform. She was also a member of the 2019 Social Security Technical Panel on Assumption and Methods, and she has taught at Occidental College. She earned her PhD in economics from Stanford University and her BA from the College of William and Mary. Without further ado, I'm very pleased to turn the program over to Professor Slavov.
Great. Thanks, Alice. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to cover two things in this presentation. The first thing that I'm going to cover, this is an important issue for everyone. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the question of what is the future of the Social Security program. You might hear in the news or from other sources that Social Security is in trouble financially. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the system works and how it got there and what policy options are for the program. The second thing that I'm going to discuss is a very important issue for people, especially those who are 55 and older. And the question that I'm going to address is really, when should you start receiving Social Security, and how can you most effectively combine your Social Security with other retirement saving? My disclaimer is I'm not a financial planner. I do research on how people make these decisions. Right. So I'm an economist. But you know, in doing that research, I think a lot about what people might do and how it compares to what I observe them doing when I look at data. So I'm going to start by with a few facts about Social Security. So Social Security plays a major role in retirement security. If you look at the data, you will find, and this is from a study that was published recently, that Social Security accounts for more than 50% of income for about 40% of the people age 65 and older. And for 14% of people age 65 and older, it actually accounts for 90% of their retirement income. So it's a major, major source of retirement income. Social Security retired worker benefits can be claimed at any age between 62 and 70. There is what's known as an actuarial adjustment made for delayed claiming. In other words, the monthly benefit that you get if you claim at age 62 is going to be lower than the monthly benefit that you get if you claim at age 70. The idea behind that is, if you claim later, you are likely to receive benefits for fewer months. Okay. And what my research and the research others have done has shown recently, especially in the past decade, is that many people can actually increase the lifetime value of their Social Security benefits through delaying their benefits. And often the increase in benefits over their lifetime amounts to tens of thousands of dollars. And these increased stakes are driven by a couple of factors. They're primarily driven by lower mortality. So as we live longer, delaying Social Security becomes a better deal. And also the Social Security benefit formula has been altered so that delaying Social Security is more rewarding. And interest rates, they're going back up, but they have been quite low. Quite recently, interest rates corrected for inflation have been quite low recently, and that has played a role as well. And this increase in lifetime benefits through delaying, that's especially going to be true for the higher earner in a couple. So the primary earner in the couple, the one with the higher income. And the reason that that's true is if the primary earner is the first to pass, the primary earner, the secondary earner, the person with the lower income can inherit the primary earner's benefit. And that's going to depend on when the amount that the person inherits per month is going to depend on when the primary earner claims. So I'll talk more about that later. That's just kind of a broad overview. And now from a policy angle, I want to talk a little bit about the structure of Social Security. So how does Social Security work? Social Security is funded by a payroll tax. The payroll tax for the old age and survivors component of the program is 10.6% of your earnings from work up to a cap. That cap is 160,200 in 2023, and the cap is indexed for wage growth, so it goes up with wage growth. Like I said, the total amount of the tax is 10.6%. It is split equally between employers and employees. Social Security benefits are based on the average of your highest 35 years of earnings during your career. Those earnings are indexed for wage growth, meaning that if you had earnings like back in 1980, they would be corrected for the fact that wages have grown between 1980 and today. And the earnings that count towards benefits are earnings up to the cap. So you're not going to see folks getting like $1 million Social Security benefits or anything like that. Once the Social Security Administration calculates your average earnings over the highest 35 years of earnings in your career, they apply a progressive benefit formula to that average earnings. What I mean by progressive is that your monthly benefit does go up with income, but it goes up at a decreasing rate, so that if you had a higher career average income, your benefits as a share of your income would be lower than if your earnings over your career were lower. And as I said earlier, you can claim anytime between 62 and 70 with that actuarial adjustment applied. The benefit is paid as an annuity, meaning that you receive the benefit every month for the rest of your life. And if you are the primary earner, you can even pass on your benefit to the secondary earner. So the secondary earner would give up their own benefit and switch to your higher benefit upon your death. And the Social Security has another feature that dependent spouses can claim a spousal benefit based on the working spouse's record. What I mean by a dependent spouse, that might mean someone who was never in the labor force because they were raising children, or it might mean a spouse that received a higher benefit based on their spouse's record compared to their own. So a spouse that didn't have very high earnings during their career. Just to give you an idea of what the benefit formula looks like. So on the horizontal axis here, what we have is an amount called your average indexed monthly earnings. So that's what I had mentioned earlier. It's the average, this is the monthly average of your earnings over the highest 35 years of earnings during your career. And then the vertical axis shows you your monthly benefit if you claim at age 67. And this applies to people turning 62 in 2023. So as you can see, as your average earnings go up, your benefit does go up, but it doesn't go up proportionately. So the people with the high average earnings are going to get a smaller share of their earnings replaced by their Social Security benefit. Okay, and like I said, this whole line like shifts up and down depending on when you claim. You can claim at 62, you'd get a lower amount. You can claim at 70, and you'd get a higher amount. Okay, so I want to step back a little bit. To understand the Social Security system's finances better, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a model. Economists use models. A model is a simplified version of reality to understand and communicate concepts. And what I'm about to show you is what economists call an overlapping generations model. So this is the model that I actually use to teach my students about Social Security, to introduce the topic in class. So I want you to imagine an island. And on this island, people live for 2 periods each. So you can think of this as, they're young in the first period, they're old in the second period, and they only live for 2 periods. There are 2 inhabitants alive on this island at any given time. There's 1 young person and 1 old person. And at the beginning of every period, a new young person's born. The previous period's old person dies, and the previous period's young person becomes old. So if you want to see this visually, here's a table, right? So the first column there measures time, right? So we've got the first period, second period, third period, and fourth period. And G1, that stands for generation 1. So generation 1, they're young in period 1. That's when they're born. And then in period 2, they become old. Generation 2, they're born in period 2. In period 3, they become old. And then they die. Generation 3, they're born in period 3, they become old in generation 4. And this keeps going. The table extends down infinitely, right? So in any given time, right, that's the rows, you can see that there are 2 people alive. So in period 2, for example, generation 1 and generation 2, they're the ones who are alive. Okay, so I want you to also imagine that on this island, each period, every young person catches 2 fish. Old people don't catch any fish, and fish cannot be stored. Okay, so we can kind of look at a table that shows us the number of fish that people eat at different stages of their life. So you've got generation 1, when they're young, they catch 2 fish. When they're old, they catch 0 fish. Over their lifetime, they've had 2 fish in total. And the same applies to generations 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay, and so you can see that there's a problem in this situation, right? In this scenario, right? People catch 2 fish when they're young, but they don't have enough to eat when they're old. So this is not good. So let's suppose that our hypothetical society tries to solve the problem of people not having enough to eat when they're old. And so they're going to implement a new policy. And the new policy is as follows. It says, starting today, and let's say today is period 2, the young are going to share half their fish with the old. So here's what this would look like. So the proposal is, right, so starting today, the young are going to share half their fish with the old, and we can visualize what this looks like in the table, right? So generation 1, they were young in period 1, and they caught and they ate their 2 fish. And now we're at period 2. Generation 1 is old. Generation 2 is young. Generation 2, they're going to catch 2 fish, but they're only going to eat 1. They're going to give the other to generation 1. Then generation 3, they're going to come along. They're going to catch 2 fish, eat 1, give 1 to generation 2. Generation 4, they're going to come along, catch 2 fish when they're young, eat 1, give 1 to generation 3. And then it's not shown here, but generation 4 will ultimately receive 1 fish from generation 5 when they're old, because this process continues off into the infinite future. So again, we can total up the number of fish that each generation got over their lifetime, right? So generation 1 had 3 fish over their lifetime. Everyone else gets 2 fish over their lifetime, and the fish are distributed better. So it's no longer the case that you don't have enough to eat when you're old. Interestingly, it looks like generation one got a free fish, right? They got 3 fish over their lifetime instead of 2. What this model illustrates is what's known as a pay-as-you-go or unfunded Social Security system. In such a system, money is taken from current workers and it's paid to current beneficiaries. It's taken from current workers and given to current beneficiaries. And one thing to note is when you start up a pay-as-you-go Social Security system, the initial group of people who are old, who are of retirement age, they're going to get their retirement paid for even if they didn't contribute to the system. Okay. Now, if you look at the U.S. Social Security system, it began in 1935, and the first generation to start receiving benefits under the system, they were the folks who retired in the early 1940s. So this is the generation that they didn't contribute to the system for very long, but they did have their retirement paid for through this system. And in subsequent years, there were expansions of the Social Security system, and the same thing happened. There was this startup free fish that a generation got. And an interesting anecdote, and this is documented on the Social Security Administration website, the first person to draw a monthly Social Security benefit, her name was Ida Mae Fuller. She was pretty close to retirement when the system got started, and she paid in like $25 in taxes. And then she started collecting a monthly benefit. She lived to be 99. She collected like $25,000 over her lifetime. So, she got a great deal, right? And you could argue people in her generation, they had experienced a lot of hardship through the Great Depression, and other things that they had been through. This may have been the rationale for this. Now, economists like to say that there is no free lunch. And it turns out that that is the case in this very simple overlapping generations model as well. Suppose, okay, so I've expanded this table a little bit. I've added generations 5, 6, and 7. Suppose for some reason the system has to shut down when generation 5 is young and generation 4 is old. Or after generation 5 has given their fish to generation 4, and then you shut the system down, generation 6 comes along, they catch their 2 fish, they eat their 2 fish, generation 5 gets nothing. Generation 7, they're going to again catch their 2 fish when they're young, no fish when they're old. So we're back to the old pattern. So who paid for that free fish that generation 1 got? It is generation 5, the generation that is old when we shut this system down. Now you may ask, do you need to shut the system down at all? That would be a great question. We'll come to that. Okay. That free fish that showed up in this overlapping generations model, it has a name. It's called the legacy debt. The legacy debt, that refers to the benefits that were received by early generations in excess of taxes paid, right? So this windfall that Ida Mae Fuller got, that's part of what's referred to as the legacy debt. Okay, I want to kind of, so we've talked about pay-as-you-go financing. I want to kind of step back and say a little bit more about it, right? In this very simple overlapping generations model, the population wasn't growing at all. The economy wasn't growing at all. You had one person who was young who was born every period, one person young, one person old. They were catching 2 fish every period. No economic growth, no population growth. In the real world, there is economic growth and there is population growth. So pay-as-you-go financing would kind of look like this structure that I've written down here. So at the top, you've got generation 1. Okay, then generation 2 comes along and they pay for generation 1's retirement. Then generation 3 comes along, they pay for generation 2's retirement, and each successive generation is bigger. So it's a pretty good deal, right? So generation 1, they've got more people paying for their retirement than are in their generation. So this kind of resembles a chain letter, right? It resembles a chain letter where each person sends the letter to like 10 other people, right? And this grows. Okay, and so the second point that I want to make about pay-as-you-go Social Security is we saw in pay-as-you-go Social Security, money's taken from current workers and paid to current beneficiaries. And when there is population growth and economic growth, especially if there's high population growth and high economic growth, pay-as-you-go Social Security provides a pretty generous rate of return because the new generation to come along that's going to finance your retirement, they're bigger than your generation. So you're typically going to get out a lot more than you put in. Okay, so the catch, though, is that if the system gets in trouble, there's no free lunch. So I'm going to put up here. This is a quote. It's from an editorial written by a guy named Paul Samuelson. And it was written in 1967. So who was Paul Samuelson? He was probably one of the greatest economists of the past century. He won a Nobel Prize. He kind of wrote one of the earliest best-selling economics textbooks. Really, really well-known guy in my field. And so he wrote this editorial really praising Social Security. He was a big fan of Social Security. And, you can read what he wrote. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially what he was saying is that Social Security is great because everyone who reaches retirement age is given benefit privileges that far exceed anything he has paid in. Why is that? It's because national product is growing at a compound interest rate and can be expected to do so as far as the eye cannot see. Always there are more youths than old folks in a growing population. And then this passage concludes with the following sentence. It concludes by saying, a growing nation is the greatest Ponzi game ever contrived. So this is from a 1967 editorial written by Paul Samuelson. He thought Social Security was great. He thought, we have stumbled upon a Ponzi game that actually works, right? If you think about Ponzi schemes or, Madoff schemes or whatever you want to call them, why do they break down in the real world? They break down because you run out of people, because that pyramid base, it grows really, really fast, and you're pretty quickly, it's exponential growth, you're going to run out of people. And what Paul Samuelson observed is that if in a nation, the population is continually growing, you can actually run a Ponzi scheme that works because you'll always have more people. You'll always have more people. Unfortunately, what happened after 1967, since the 1960s, population growth has slowed, wage growth has slowed, and Social Security's rate of return has become lower than the return on private investment. So that the base of that pyramid that I showed you, it's not growing nearly as fast as it was. Okay, so now in our little overlapping generations model, we were kind of looking at a very stylized pay-as-you-go Social Security system. The Social Security system in the US is not truly pay-as-you-go. It's mostly pay-as-you-go. In some years, the system takes in more money than it pays out. In other years, it pays out more money than it takes in. Okay, and starting in the early 80s-ish, the system was paying out less money than it was taking in. And what happened was a trust fund built up. Then starting in about 2010, the system actually started running deficits. It started paying out more money than it was taking in. And as that happens, so the taxes coming in are not enough to pay the benefits that are owed. The remainder of those benefits, that's taken out of the trust fund. And what's happening, and you can see this in this diagram, I took this from the Social Security Trustees Report from 2023. So what's happening here, if you kind of look at this solid line that I'm tracing out here, this solid line that kind of becomes a dotted line, that shows you the benefits that are promised under current law. And right here on the x-axis, you've got year, right? You've got year. And what you see is benefits that are promised under current law, they're growing over time. Okay, this is aggregate benefits, and the reason that they're growing you had this kind of immediate situation with the retirement of the baby boomers, but more generally, there's this trend towards people living longer and lower birth rates, right? So our population is aging, right? And that's what we're seeing here. The costs are kind of going up over time. And then this kind of narrower solid line here, this is revenue coming in. It's kind of flat. Okay, so this is revenue coming into the system. So what you see is that before 2010 or so, the benefits that were paid out were smaller than the revenue coming in. And so that trust fund was being built up. And then they kind of crossed around or a little bit before 2010, according to this graph. And the benefits being paid out exceed the revenue coming in. And so we're drawing down on the trust fund, and then something happens in 2034. In 2034, the trust fund will run out of money. Okay, so the trust fund runs out of money in 2034. Now, so what happens at that point? Current law actually says that when the trust fund runs out, benefits need to be cut across the board to bring them in line with the money coming in. And so at that point in 2034, according to this calculation by the Social Security actuaries, the money coming in will be enough to cover about 80% of the benefits that are promised. So it'd be like a 20% across the board benefit cut. Now, that's what current law says. To be clear, I don't think that's actually what's going to happen. I think that's highly unlikely. And the reason I think it's highly unlikely is it would involve cutting benefits for current beneficiaries. Politically, that's not going to be acceptable. But what it does mean, this exhaustion of the trust fund, what it does mean is that lawmakers will need to take some kind of action before that date to restore the system's finances. So what are the possible options? Essentially, the math of Social Security is pretty simple. Social Security finances largely depend on 4 variables. The first variable is the payroll tax rate. Okay, and the second variable is the average wage that the wage that the average worker is earning. And so jointly, those first 2 variables determine how much the average worker is paying into the system. Okay, and then the third variable is the average benefit level. So how much is the average beneficiary receiving? How much are they collecting from the system? And then the fourth variable is what's called the dependency ratio. It's the number of beneficiaries divided by the number of workers. So that measures how many people are collecting money from the system versus the number of people who are paying in. Okay, these are the 4 variables that determine Social Security's finances. When the system gets in trouble, one of these variables has to change. At least one has to change. It's going to be pretty difficult to make large changes through policy to the dependency ratio. You might be able to make small changes, for example, through increased immigration. But you're not going to be able to make large changes. Changes in the average wage, again, that's harder to achieve. You can try to enact policies that boost labor force participation or increase productivity, but they're not going to, bottom line is they're not going to have a huge impact on Social Security's finances. So what are the remaining variables? The remaining variables are the payroll tax rate and the benefit level. So fundamentally, to get out of this financial trouble, Social Security does need to either increase the payroll tax rate or cut benefits, cut promised benefits. Okay, so the math is simple, like I said, but the politics are hard because it's going to require making some difficult choices. And that's I'm not going to tell you what I think should happen because we can all have an opinion about what should happen. But ideally before 2034, hopefully sooner rather than later, we as a society can kind of make those choices and those compromises. I would argue that shortfall should be addressed sooner rather than later because that really protects young people from uncertainty as they plan for their retirements. You can try it yourself if you want to experiment with different policies to reform Social Security. it's an organization called the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. They've created this tool, and the URL is in the slide. And I have my students actually play with this, where you can kind of turn on and off different reforms to Social Security and see the impact that it has on the system's finances. So I always encourage people to kind of play with that to understand the issues better. So that's all I really want to say about kind of the policy issues involved in Social Security. I'm going to turn next to this question of when should you claim Social Security, and how can you make Social Security work with any other retirement saving that you might have. So if you look at the data, when do most people start Social Security? The answer is almost immediately. So this graph, this is a histogram of the number of months since either turning 62 or last working that a person claims Social Security. And what you see is the vast majority of people claim Social Security either right when they turn 62 or right when they stop working. There's no sort of delay in Social Security. In fact, a lot of people use claiming Social Security as a synonym for retirement. The Social Security Administration sometimes does this too. So one point that I want to make is that this doesn't have to be the case. You don't have to start Social Security right when you retire. In fact, what you could do is you could separate retirement and Social Security decisions, and you can do that if you have other retirement saving. Okay, so what would this look like? It might look like, you stop working, let's say when you're 62, you tap into your retirement saving. If you've got a 401k through work, for example, you could tap into that to finance living expenses for a couple of years, then claim Social Security later. So that is an option that's available. Now, for folks who don't have other retirement savings, one thought could be potentially working longer to be able to finance a delay of Social Security. So that would involve delaying both retirement and claiming. Okay, now, question is, should you do that? I'm going to show you a little bit of data and some analysis that I've done with some colleagues. So what this table shows you is how much your benefits change if you defer Social Security from any age shown down here in red to any age shown up here in green, right? So if you were considering claiming Social Security at 62 and you delay instead to 63, what you see is that your monthly benefit would go up by 7%. If you defer all the way to 70, your monthly benefit would be 77% higher. So it's a pretty huge increase in your monthly benefit. If you were thinking about claiming when you're 66 and you instead wait till you're 70, your monthly benefit compared to your age 66 benefit would go up by 33%. Okay, and this applies to people born in 1960 and later. Okay, so you can basically look up in this table any deferral period and see how much your monthly benefits would go up if you delay. And some research that I've done, some research that others have done show that at least financially, delaying Social Security is a pretty good deal. So why is it a good deal? Well, one reason is that people are living much longer today. And this table shows you the remaining life expectancy of people who are in their 60s. And I did this for an analysis back in 2017. So mortality has probably improved a little bit since then on net, even considering COVID. It's that a 60-year-old, but it hasn't changed that dramatically, is my point. So if you look at a 60-year-old man can expect to live for an additional 23 years, and a 60-year-old woman can expect to live for an additional 26 years. So that's kind of what this table tells you. For couples, it's a little bit more complicated because you want to, if you're in a couple, plan for both your lives. Right, you want to plan to be comfortable, to have a reasonable standard of living as long as at least one of you is still alive. So, for example, if you consider a couple where you have a husband who's age 62 and a wife who's age 60, what the first row of this table shows you is that the expected number of years until the first person in this couple dies is about almost 18 years. Right, and more likely in this couple where the husband is 62 and the wife is 60, the first person to pass is going to be the husband, but it may be the wife. But on average, they can expect about 18 years until the first person in the couple dies, and then there's an addition, and then there's the number of years until both members of the couple have passed. That is almost 30 years. Okay, so on average, you could expect if you are, if you are the widow, you can expect your widowhood period to last about 12 years. So a couple would need to think about planning for this whole 30-year period. Okay, and that's much longer than people have had to plan for in the past. Now, it's the length of widowhood really that makes deferring Social Security a really good deal for people who are the higher earner in the couple. Right, so if you're the higher earner in the couple, when you die, your spouse, your surviving spouse, can switch to receiving your benefit, your higher benefit, instead of their lower benefit. Okay, and the benefit that they inherit from you, that's going to depend on when you claimed. If you claim later, they're going to inherit a higher benefit. So that higher earner's benefit, really, if you delay, that higher benefit gets paid out over a period of like 22 to 25 years. Okay, for the lower earner, it's less of a good deal because that lower earner, they're going to switch to the higher earner's benefit if and when they're widowed. Okay, what my research has shown is that if your only goal is to maximize your monetary lifetime benefits, if you're a single man in average health, you'd want to defer Social Security to age 69. If you're a single woman in average health, you'd want to defer to age 70. Okay, and the reason is women have, on average, lower mortality than men. If you're a couple in average health, to maximize lifetime benefits, the higher earner in the couple should defer to age 70. The lower earner, it doesn't matter so much when they start their benefits. Okay. Now, I can kind of walk you through a case study to show how this might work. So imagine you have a husband and wife. They're both age 62. They're in average health, and they've both stopped working. They can consider two alternative strategies for tapping into their retirement assets. The first strategy is a more traditional strategy that my coworkers and I have referred to as a parallel strategy, and that takes the following form. You claim Social Security at 62, and you take any money that you have sitting in a 401k, and you either buy an annuity or you make periodic withdrawals to top up Social Security to add to your income. It turns out, though, that the parallel strategy doesn't maximize your income over your lifetime. The strategy that does actually maximize your income is where the husband defers Social Security to 70, the wife defers Social Security to 65, and the couple uses any money that they have sitting in their 401k to finance that delay period. So let's say this couple has about $200,000 sitting in a 401k. Here's the parallel strategy illustrated. The blue bars here show Social Security income at different ages, and it's going up because Social Security is adjusted for inflation, right? And then the red bars show that's the additional amount that you receive from your 401k if you use it to buy an annuity or you're making periodic withdrawals. And then you can see your total income kind of goes up with inflation as well as you age. The alternative strategy is to have the husband delay Social Security to age 70 and the wife delay to age 65, right? So Social Security benefits kick in this graph here at age 65, and there you see kind of this small blue bar, that's the wife's Social Security benefit. Then at age 70, the husband's Social Security benefits also kick in, and both the husband and the wife have benefited, they've gotten a higher monthly benefit through delay. And then the red bars show the money that they would need to take out of their 401k to make up the difference between this strategy and the parallel strategy. Okay, so by construction in this example, they're taking out money from their 401k to make their income during this delay period from 62 to 69 equal to their income under the parallel strategy. And then what you see after that is that their income is actually higher in every year. So this is really the strategy that maximizes their income long term. I've shown you here the difference in income at age 70 and beyond, right? So during this delay period from 62 to 69, they've just taken out enough money from their 401k to make up the difference in income. So there's no difference in income. Then from age 70 onwards, the couple's income is higher in every year. The best part is really for the widow. Right. So if they both claim at age 62, and that's the parallel strategy, the income for the widow, if the wife is widowed, that's represented by the blue bars. If the husband delays to age 70 and the wife delays to 65, right, the wife then gets to inherit that enhanced benefit that the husband got by delaying his benefit. And there you see that her income, if she is widowed, is higher in every year. And you get similar results if it's the husband who's the secondary earner and the wife who's the primary earner. The only real difference is the slight gender differential in mortality. So kind of looking at the big picture, in this case study, the couple has the same income from 62 to 69, and they've got between 10 and 21% more income from age 70 onwards. The survivor enjoys between 28 and 39% more income if they both delay, according to this strategy. Their kids may even benefit, since there's less of a chance that the kids would need to step in to take care of a dependent widow. So essentially deferring for this couple to age 65 for the wife and age 70 for the husband results in more retirement security than when they both claimed at 62. Now, this couple, I made the assumption that they had about 200,000 in their 401k, and they were using this to finance their living expenses during their delay period. And you might say, well, that's all well and good for people who have a bunch of money stashed away in a 401k. What if you don't? Well, if you don't have other retirement saving, the option that's remaining to you to take advantage of these gains from delay would be working longer. It's less clear in that situation whether you should do it, because your goal may not necessarily be to maximize your income over your lifetime, right? You'd need to balance the increase in income from delaying against, how stressful your job is, or how stressful you find it interacting with your coworkers or boss, right? But it turns out, and our analysis has found that even an additional 1 or 2 years of work can have a very large impact on retirement income if you were to delay work and claiming by a couple of years. And the nice thing about this strategy is it's available even if someone is approaching retirement and they wish they had saved more. There is still the option to work maybe a year or two longer and delay Social Security, and that can substantially boost your income. Now, obviously, you'd want to decide if that's worth it to you to delay retirement by a couple of years, but those are just kind of the numbers associated with it. So I will wrap up here and see if there are any questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the cap
Yeah.
at this 160,000.
Yeah.
When's the last time the cap was raised?
So it gets raised every year to match wage growth. Right. So it's 160,000 this year. It was a little bit less last year. And so it kind of goes up with the average wage in the economy. I don't know if this is what you were getting at, but some reform proposals have involved raising that cap, removing that cap, putting in another threshold of, there is a plan out there of like $400,000 where the payroll tax would again apply above that threshold. So that is part of discussions about Social Security reform, is whether that cap should be raised or even eliminated.
I guess my question also is, What is the logic behind capping it?
Behind the cap. Yeah, the logic, I think, and I'm not going to. I think the logic is so you pay taxes on your income up to 160,000, and then you also receive benefits on income only up to 160,000. If you were to receive benefits based on all your income, you'd have folks like Elon Musk getting $1 million Social Security checks, and to kind of rule that out. Everyone's in up to 160,000, but not more. So that is, I think, the logic behind it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Patrick, did you have some questions?
Well, I do see here, I did receive some questions.
Yeah.
And let me see if I can pull them up here. Okay, so the first one is, my spouse is 8 years older than I am, but he would receive a higher Social Security payment by taking the spousal allotment of half of my payment when I take Social Security at 65. And in parentheses, she says, when he is 73.
Yeah.
Since he is older, in the years before I claim Social Security, can he claim his own Social Security payment and then switch
And
to
then switch.
mine when I turn 65 and start claiming benefits?
Yeah, unfortunately, they've ruled that out. You're not allowed to do that anymore.
Okay.
You were up until fairly recently, but
Okay, great. I will pass that on.
yeah.
Another question here from the same person. What is the easiest way for someone to find out the amount of Social Security payment they would be eligible for from an ex-spouse?
Oh, from an ex-spouse. Oh, that's
Yes.
an interesting question. I don't know kind of how that you might be able to talk to the Social Security Administration, because I imagine when you go to claim your benefit based on an ex-spouse's record, you provide them with your ex-spouse's information, and they should be able to tell you how much you would be entitled to. I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine that's the most direct way to figure this out.
Okay.
Or asking the ex-spouse, obviously.
Right.
You would be entitled to half their benefit. And they're able to create an account on the Social Security website and check.
Right. Okay, great. And then one last question. Assuming someone has worked 40 quarters,
Yep.
what are the other biggest factors in determining how high a Social Security payment is?
Yeah, so it generally depends on your wages, and I can go back to on your average earnings. So I can kind of go back to this was an early graph. All right, there it is. Yeah. So this graph kind of shows you how your benefit relates to your average earnings over your career. So your average earnings over your career, that's the biggest factor in determining your benefits. In this graph, it kind of shows that if your average earnings over your career were 1,000, that's monthly, right? So your average monthly earnings over your career were $1,000, you'd get a benefit of 900. Right. And then you've kind of got this other range where you get another portion of that. So that's the biggest driving factor, as well as the age at which you claim.
Okay. All right, great. That is it. All the questions that I see. Anyone else? Any last questions for Sita?
Well, I don't have anything, Patrick, but I would like to thank Sita. It was a very informative talk, and I really learned a lot, and I'm sure that our listeners did too. And I thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
My pleasure. Always love to talk about Social Security.